The year was 2147, and humanity had reached a point in its history where it seemed nothing could stop its progress. The skies were filled with drones delivering packages, cities floated on water to combat rising sea levels, and space exploration had become as common as air travel once was. But despite all the advancements, humans still carried the same flaws they always had: greed, division, and an inability to work together when it mattered most. Deep beneath the surface of the Pacific Ocean, far away from the bustling metropolises and crowded spaceports, something unusual was happening. Ethan Cole adjusted his goggles and leaned closer to the holographic display in front of him. He was inside Deep Haven, an underwater research facility located nearly 3 miles below the ocean's surface. It was one of the most advanced scientific outposts ever built, designed to study everything from marine life to geological activity. Today, however, Ethan wasn't focused on fish or coral reefs. Something much bigger had caught his attention. "Laura," Ethan called over his shoulder without taking his eyes off the screen. "Can you come here for a second? I think we've got something." Laura Bennett walked over, her boots making soft metallic clicks against the floor. She was shorter than Ethan, with curly brown hair tied back into a messy bun and glasses perched on her nose. Like Ethan, she wore the standard-issue uniform of Deep Haven, a snug jumpsuit that glowed faintly blue under the artificial lights. "What is it?" Laura asked, peering at the data streaming across the display. Ethan pointed to a series of jagged lines representing seismic activity. "Look at this pattern. It's not natural. These aren't just random tremors. They're too rhythmic, almost. Like they're deliberate." Laura frowned, leaning in closer. "You mean like someone or something is causing them?" "Exactly." Ethan nodded, his voice tinged with excitement. "Whatever it is, it's deep. Really deep. Deeper than anything we've seen before, and it's getting stronger." The two scientists exchanged a glance. They'd been working together for years, long enough to know each other's thoughts without needing to say much. Laura trusted Ethan's instincts. He had a knack for spotting things others missed. But this was different. This felt big. "We should run more tests," Laura said finally. "Maybe cross-reference the data with historical records. If there's something down there, we need to figure out what it is before it becomes a problem." Ethan agreed, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. Over the next few hours, they worked tirelessly, analyzing waveforms, checking pressure readings, and reviewing decades' worth of geological surveys. Every new piece of information only added to the mystery. Whatever was causing the disturbances, it didn't match any known phenomenon. As the hours dragged on, the hum of machinery and the gentle rocking of the station provided a strange kind of comfort. Outside the reinforced walls of Deep Haven, the ocean stretched endlessly, dark and silent save for the occasional flicker of bioluminescent creatures drifting past the windows. To most people, the depths of the sea were alien enough, even now. In an age of interstellar travel, the oceans remained largely unexplored. But Ethan and Laura had dedicated their lives to understanding this hidden world, and they took pride in uncovering its secrets. By the time they finished their analysis, exhaustion had set in, but neither of them wanted to stop. They gathered around a large touchscreen table in the lab, pulling up maps and charts to visualize their findings. "It's moving," Ethan said suddenly, tapping a spot on the map. "See this? These vibrations are shifting, slowly, but definitely moving upward." Laura's brow furrowed. "Upward? Toward the surface?" "Yeah." Ethan rubbed his temples, trying to process what it meant. "If whatever's down there keeps going at this rate, it'll breach the seabed within days. Maybe less." A heavy silence fell between them. Neither spoke for a moment, both acutely aware of the implications. If something massive was buried deep below the ocean floor, and if it was about to emerge, it could spell disaster. Tsunamis, earthquakes, even volcanic eruptions could follow. The potential consequences were catastrophic. "We have to warn someone," Laura said quietly. Ethan hesitated. "Who do we tell? The military? Politicians? Half of them won't believe us, and the other half will probably panic." She sighed, knowing he was right. Governments weren't exactly known for handling crises calmly, especially ones involving unknown threats. Still, they couldn't sit idly by while the planet teetered on the brink of chaos. "Let's gather more evidence first," Laura suggested. "We'll document everything, every reading, every anomaly. Then we'll present our case to General Hayes, at least he listens to reason." General Matthew Hayes was the head of Earth's Global Defense Initiative, a coalition formed to protect the planet from extraterrestrial threats. Though primarily focused on defending against potential alien invasions, the GDI also monitored global security issues. If anyone would take their warning seriously, it would be him. With renewed determination, Ethan and Laura returned to their workstations. They spent the rest of the night poring over data, double-checking calculations, and preparing detailed reports. By morning, they had compiled a comprehensive dossier outlining their findings. But as dawn broke outside the watery confines of Deep Haven, neither scientist realized how quickly events would spiral out of control. While they prepared to send their report to General Hayes, sensors aboard the station began picking up strange signals emanating from the source of the disturbances. At first, they thought it might be interference from their own equipment, but then the signals grew louder, clearer, until they resolved into something unmistakable: a transmission. Ethan stared at the monitor, his heart pounding. That's not natural either. Laura moved closer, her eyes wide. It's a message. Someone, or something, is trying to communicate. For a moment, they simply stood there, frozen in awe. The realization hit them simultaneously. Whatever was buried beneath the ocean floor wasn't just waking up, it was reaching out, and it wasn't alone. Far above the waves, in the cold vacuum of space, a fleet of alien ships emerged from hyperspace. Their sleek, angular designs gleamed ominously as they positioned themselves in orbit around Earth. Among them was Cale Vorn, a warlord feared across the galaxy for his ruthlessness and ambition. His mission was clear: conquer Earth and claim its resources, or destroy it if resistance proved too great. Back at Deep Haven, Ethan and Laura scrambled to make sense of the unfolding situation. The aliens' arrival coincided perfectly with the mysterious signals emanating from the depths. Was it a coincidence, or were the two events connected? Before they could answer those questions, alarms blared throughout the station. A surge of energy pulsed through the water, shaking the very foundations of Deep Haven. Lights flickered, equipment malfunctioned, and the screens displaying their precious data went blank. "What's happening?" Laura shouted, gripping the edge of the table to steady herself. "I don't know," Ethan replied, frantically typing commands into his console. "But whatever it is, it's coming from below." Outside the thick glass windows, the normally tranquil waters churned violently. Shadows moved in the distance, shapes too large to comprehend. For the first time in their careers, Ethan and Laura felt truly small, insignificant in the face of forces beyond their understanding. And yet, amidst the chaos, one thought kept repeating in Ethan's mind: this changes everything. Little did they know, their discovery would soon ignite a war unlike any Earth had ever seen. The shaking inside Deep Haven grew worse. The once stable research station groaned under the strain as if it were being squeezed by an invisible hand. Ethan and Laura clung to their workstations, trying to steady themselves while alarms screamed overhead. Outside the reinforced windows, the ocean had transformed into a chaotic maelstrom. Currents swirled violently, and dark shapes loomed in the murky depths, their outlines distorted by the swirling sediment. "What's causing this?" Laura shouted, her voice barely audible over the deafening noise. Her fingers flew across the keyboard of her console, attempting to bring the systems back online, but every time she thought she'd stabilized one system, another would fail. It was like fighting against an unseen enemy that refused to let them regain control. Ethan didn't answer immediately. His eyes were glued to the monitors, which flickered erratically before finally stabilizing for a brief moment. On the screen, he saw something that made his blood run cold, a massive energy spike originating from far below the seabed. Whatever was buried down there wasn't just waking up, it was breaking free. "We need to get out of here," Ethan said urgently, grabbing Laura by the arm. "If whatever's down there comes up, this whole station could collapse." "Laura, hesitated, torn between survival and duty. They hadn't finished gathering data, and leaving now felt like abandoning their mission. But the look on Ethan's face told her they didn't have a choice. Reluctantly, she nodded, and together they rushed toward the emergency exit. As they moved through the narrow corridors of the station, the walls vibrated with increasing intensity. Pipes burst, spraying water onto the floor, and emergency lights cast eerie red shadows across the metal surfaces. The two scientists stumbled forward, their boots splashing through puddles as they fought to keep their balance. Behind them, the sound of grinding metal echoed ominously, a reminder that the structure holding them might not last much longer. Finally, they reached the airlock leading to the submersible bay. Ethan punched in the code to open the door, but nothing happened. He cursed under his breath and tried again, his hands trembling with adrenaline. This time, the lock clicked, and the heavy door slid open with a hiss. Cold, damp air rushed in, carrying the salty tang of the ocean. Inside the bay, their small submersible waited, its sleek form gleaming faintly in the dim light. Ethan climbed into the pilot's seat while Laura secured herself in the co-pilot's chair. With practiced efficiency, Ethan powered up the vessel and initiated the launch sequence. Moments later, the submersible detached from the station and began its ascent toward the surface. Neither of them spoke as they rose through the water. The turbulence outside the thick glass dome of the submersible was unnerving. Swirling currents, flashes of bioluminescence, and those same shadowy forms that had appeared earlier. Something big was moving down there. Something alive. And it was getting closer. When they broke the surface, the sight that greeted them was even more alarming. The sky above was filled with unfamiliar ships, gleaming, angular vessels hovering silently in formation. Their metallic surfaces reflected the sunlight, making them look almost otherworldly. Ethan and Laura stared in stunned silence, their minds struggling to process what they were seeing. "Are those alien ships?" Laura whispered, her voice shaking. Ethan didn't respond. His focus shifted to the communication panel in front of him. If these aliens had arrived at the same time as the disturbances beneath the ocean, then the connection was undeniable. But why? What did they want? Before he could act, a blinding beam of light shot down from one of the ships, striking the water near their submersible. The impact sent shockwaves rippling outward, rocking the tiny craft violently. Ethan gripped the controls tightly, fighting to keep them steady. "They're attacking!" Laura exclaimed, clutching the edge of her seat. "No, wait," Ethan said, his eyes narrowing as he studied the ship's movements. "Look, they're not aiming at us, they're scanning the area, probing." Sure enough, the beams of light continued to sweep across the ocean, illuminating patches of water and creating columns of steam where they struck. It was as though the aliens were searching for something, or someone. Ethan's mind raced. Could they be looking for whatever was buried beneath the seabed? If so, then humanity was caught in the middle of something far bigger than anyone could have imagined. He knew they needed to warn Earth's leaders. But how? Communication systems worldwide had been disrupted by the energy waves emanating from below. Even if they managed to send a message, who would believe them? "We need to find help," Ethan said finally, turning the submersible toward the nearest coastline. "If we can't reach General Hayes directly, maybe we can alert someone who can." Laura nodded, though fear lingered in her expression. "But what about Deep Haven? What if the others are still down there?" Ethan clenched his jaw. The thought of leaving their colleagues behind weighed heavily on him, but returning to the station was suicide. Whatever was happening down there was beyond their ability to stop. All they could do now was survive, and hope they could make someone listen. As they sped across the surface of the water, the alien ships remained ominously silent. No transmissions, no visible signs of life. Just the steady hum of their engines and the occasional flash of light as they continued their search. It was clear they weren't interested in communicating with humans, at least not yet. Hours passed, and the coastline came into view. Ethan guided the submersible into a secluded cove, hiding it among the rocks to avoid detection. From there, they hiked inland, keeping low and avoiding roads or populated areas. News of the alien arrival had already spread, judging by the panicked messages playing on car radios and portable devices. People were fleeing cities, unsure whether the visitors came in peace or war. Eventually, they found a small military outpost tucked away in the hills. Soldiers patrolled nervously, their weapons drawn as they scanned the skies for any sign of attack. Ethan approached cautiously, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "I need to speak to your commanding officer," he said firmly. "It's urgent." One of the soldiers stepped forward, his rifle trained on Ethan. "Who are you? What do you know about those ships?" "My name is Ethan Cole," he replied, glancing at Laura before continuing. "We're scientists from Deep Haven. We've discovered something big that might explain why they're here, but we don't have much time." The soldier hesitated, then lowered his weapon slightly. "Wait here," he said, motioning for another soldier to escort them inside. Inside the outpost, the atmosphere was tense. Maps covered the walls marked with red circles indicating potential landing sites for the alien ships. Officers barked orders into radios, their voices tinged with desperation. When Ethan and Laura were brought before the base commander, a stern-looking woman named Captain Rachel Monroe, they wasted no time explaining their situation. "You're saying there's something buried beneath the ocean floor?" Monroe asked, skeptically leaning back in her chair. "And you think it's connected to the aliens?" "Yes," Ethan replied, spreading out the data they'd salvaged from Deep Haven. "These readings prove it. There's massive seismic activity coming from deep below the seabed, along with strange energy signals. Whatever's down there, it's powerful, and it woke up right when the aliens showed up." Monroe studied the information carefully, her expression unreadable. Finally, she sighed and leaned forward. "Even if I believe you, what exactly do you expect me to do? We're stretched thin as it is. Most of our forces are focused on evacuating civilians." "We need to contact General Hayes," Laura interjected. "He'll understand. If anyone can mobilize a response, it's him." Monroe frowned but nodded. "All right. I'll send your report to HQ, but don't expect miracles. Right now, everyone's bracing for the worst." Ethan and Laura exchanged a glance. They knew convincing people wouldn't be easy, especially given the scale of what they were dealing with. Still, it was a start. As night fell, the outpost buzzed with activity. Soldiers prepared defenses, while engineers worked tirelessly to repair damaged communication arrays. Outside, the alien ships remained eerily still as if waiting for something. The tension was palpable, hanging heavy in the air like a storm about to break. Unbeknownst to anyone, however, the real threat lay not in the skies, but in the depths below. Far beneath the ocean floor, something ancient stirred, awakened by the presence of both humans and aliens alike. Its purpose was unclear, its motives unknown. But one thing was certain. When it emerged, nothing would ever be the same again. For now, Ethan and Laura could only watch and wait, hoping they hadn't uncovered a force too great for anyone to control. The night was long and restless at the military outpost. Soldiers moved in hurried patterns, their boots crunching against gravel as they fortified defenses and checked equipment. The air was thick with tension, a mix of fear and determination that seemed to weigh down everyone present. Ethan and Laura sat in a small briefing room, poring over maps and data on a portable holographic display. Their faces were pale, shadows under their eyes betraying their exhaustion. But they couldn't afford to rest, not when the fate of the planet might depend on what they'd discovered. Captain Rachel Monroe entered the room, her sharp features illuminated by the soft glow of the hologram. She carried herself with authority, but there was no mistaking the worry etched into her expression. "HQ received your report," she said, pulling up a chair. "They're taking it seriously, at least as seriously as anyone can take news about aliens and ancient monsters." Ethan looked up, his brow furrowed. "What does that mean? Are they sending reinforcements?" Monroe hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Reinforcements are being mobilized, but it's not just us they're worried about. Cities along the coastlines are reporting strange phenomena, rogue waves, sudden storms, even tremors. It's like the ocean itself is fighting back. Laura leaned forward, her voice trembling slightly. That's because it is fighting back. Whatever's buried down there, it's alive, and it's angry. Monroe studied them for a moment, then nodded. I believe you. But convincing others won't be easy. People don't want to hear about ancient sea creatures or alien invasions. They want answers. Concrete ones. Before Ethan could respond, the ground beneath them shuddered violently. Cups and papers slid off the table, crashing to the floor. Outside, shouts erupted as soldiers scrambled to stabilize themselves. The shaking lasted only a few seconds, but its impact was undeniable. What was that? Laura asked, gripping the edge of the table. Monroe stood quickly, grabbing her radio. Status report, she barked into the device. Static crackled before a voice came through. Ma'am, we've got movement offshore. Something big just breached the surface, bigger than anything we've ever seen. Ethan's heart sank. He knew exactly what or who it was. Leviathan, he muttered under his breath. Leviathan, Monroe repeated, turning to face him. You know what this thing is? It's complicated, Ethan admitted, exchanging a glance with Laura. Let's just say it's been sleeping for a very long time, and now it's awake. Without waiting for further explanation, Monroe motioned for them to follow her outside. The three of them hurried toward the edge of the outpost where soldiers had gathered, staring out at the horizon. In the distance, towering above the waves, was a shape so massive it defied comprehension. Its body shimmered in the moonlight, scales glinting like polished obsidian. Water cascaded off its sides as it rose higher, dwarfing even the largest cargo ships. A deep, resonant hum filled the air, vibrating through the ground and into their bones. My God, one of the soldiers whispered, lowering his rifle. No weapon in their arsenal could harm something like that. Ethan felt a mixture of awe and dread. This was Leviathan, a being spoken of only in myths and legends. Ancient texts described it as Earth's guardian, a protector hidden within the oceans since time immemorial. But seeing it now, alive and real, was overwhelming. He wondered if humanity deserved such protection, or if Leviathan saw them as part of the problem. As if sensing their presence, the creature turned its massive head toward the shore. Its eyes glowed faintly, twin orbs of golden light that seemed to pierce through the darkness. For a moment, everything was still, the world holding its breath. Then, without warning, Leviathan unleashed a deafening roar that echoed across the water. The sound was primal, ancient, and utterly terrifying. They're here, someone shouted, pointing skyward. Everyone looked up to see the alien fleet descending rapidly, their sleek ships cutting through the clouds. Beams of energy lashed out, striking the water around Leviathan in an attempt to drive it back. But the creature didn't flinch. Instead, it surged forward, its tail whipping through the waves with enough force to create a tsunami. The wall of water slammed into several alien vessels, sending them spiraling out of control. They're attacking it, Laura exclaimed, clutching Ethan's arm. Her voice was a mix of horror and disbelief. Ethan watched in stunned silence as the battle unfolded. Leviathan moved with impossible speed and grace, dodging blasts of energy while retaliating with devastating precision. Its jaws snapped shut around one of the smaller ships, crushing it like tin foil before tossing it aside. Another ship fired, a concentrated beam directly at the creature's head. But Leviathan barely reacted, shrugging off the attack as though it were nothing more than an annoyance. They're losing, Monroe murmured, her tone a mix of awe and relief. Whatever that thing is, it's stronger than they are. But Ethan wasn't so sure. Despite Leviathan's power, the alien showed no signs of retreating. More ships joined the fray, firing relentlessly in an effort to overwhelm the creature. Explosions lit up the night sky, casting eerie reflections on the churning water below. The ocean roared in response, waves growing larger and more violent with each passing second. We need to help it, Ethan said suddenly, turning to Monroe. Monroe raised an eyebrow. Help it? How do you propose we do that? Our weapons are useless against either side. Not weapons, Ethan replied, his mind racing. We found something earlier, energy signals coming from below the seabed. If we can figure out how to amplify those signals, maybe we can give Leviathan the boost it needs to finish them off. Laura nodded eagerly. It makes sense. Those signals must be connected to Leviathan somehow. If we can harness them. Monroe frowned, clearly skeptical. Even if you're right, we don't have the resources to pull something like that off. Not here, not now. There's a facility nearby, Ethan insisted. An old research station abandoned years ago. It's got equipment we can use if we move fast. Monroe hesitated, weighing the risks. Finally, she sighed and nodded. All right, you two go. Take a team with you. But if things go south, don't expect me to send backup. With that, Ethan and Laura gathered a small group of soldiers and set out for the abandoned station. The journey was tense, every rustle of leaves or distant explosion making them jump. When they arrived, the building was in disrepair, its walls covered in vines and its windows shattered. Still, the core systems appeared intact, powered by a backup generator that sputtered to life after some coaxing. Working together, Ethan and Laura began setting up the equipment they needed. They rigged sensors to detect the energy signals and connected them to amplifiers scavenged from the station's storage. Time was running out. The battle offshore showed no signs of slowing, and Leviathan was starting to falter under the relentless assault. This has to work, Laura said, her hands trembling as she adjusted the final connections. If it doesn't, it will, Ethan interrupted firmly, though he wasn't entirely convinced himself. We've come too far to fail now. Finally, everything was ready. With a deep breath, Ethan activated the system. Energy pulsed through the wires, creating a low hum that grew louder and more intense. Outside, the ground trembled as the amplified signals reached outward seeking their target. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, far out at sea, Leviathan let out another earth-shaking roar. Its body glowed brighter, the golden light spreading across its scales until it resembled a living sun. The creature surged forward with renewed strength, smashing through alien ships with ease. One by one, the invaders fell, their once mighty fleet reduced to burning wreckage. Back at the station, Ethan and Laura collapsed onto the floor, exhausted but triumphant. They had done it. They had tipped the scales in humanity's favor. But as the dust settled and the survivors began to regroup, one question lingered in everyone's minds. What would Leviathan do next? The aftermath of the battle left the world in stunned silence. News outlets scrambled to piece together what had happened, broadcasting shaky footage of Leviathan rising from the depths and decimating the alien fleet. Social media was flooded with videos captured by terrified witnesses, some showing massive waves crashing against coastlines, others capturing glimpses of the creature's glowing form cutting through the night sky. For many people, it felt like something out of a nightmare. Yet here it was, undeniable proof that Earth was not alone, and neither were its oceans. Ethan and Laura stood outside the abandoned research station, their faces pale but resolute as they watched the horizon. The air smelled of salt and burnt metal, remnants of the chaos that had unfolded hours earlier. Soldiers milled about, securing the area and tending to the wounded, but no one spoke much. Everyone knew they had witnessed something extraordinary, something that defied explanation. It worked, Laura said finally, breaking the silence. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant, as if she couldn't quite believe it herself. We actually helped it. Ethan nodded, though his expression remained somber. Yeah, we did, but now what? What happens next? Laura didn't have an answer, neither did anyone else. Humanity had been thrust into a conflict far beyond its understanding, and while Leviathan had saved them, for now, there was no guarantee it would stay on their side. Ancient legends painted the creature as a guardian, but legends weren't always kind. Guardians could turn into destroyers if provoked. Captain Rachel Monroe approached them, her boots crunching against the gravel. She looked exhausted, her uniform smeared with dirt and ash, but her eyes were sharp. HQ wants a full debrief, she said without preamble. They're sending a team to take over operations here. In the meantime, you two need to come with me. Where are we going? Ethan asked, though he already suspected the answer. To meet General Hayes, Monroe replied. He's assembling a council to figure out our next move. If anyone can make sense of this mess, it's him. Ethan exchanged a glance with Laura. They both knew meeting General Hayes meant stepping into uncharted territory. The man was known for his no-nonsense attitude and strategic brilliance, but dealing with aliens and ancient sea monsters wasn't exactly covered in military training manuals. Still, they didn't have much choice. Whatever came next, they needed to be part of the conversation. The journey to HQ took longer than expected. Roads were blocked by debris or swamped with panicked civilians trying to flee coastal areas. Rumors spread faster than facts, fueling paranoia and confusion. Some people hailed Leviathan as a savior, while others feared it might turn on humanity once the aliens were dealt with. Either way, the creature's presence had changed everything. When they finally arrived at the Global Defense Initiative's command center, the atmosphere was tense. Officers bustled about, shouting orders and poring over maps and data streams. Screens lined the walls displaying real-time updates from satellites tracking the remaining alien ships. So far, the invaders hadn't regrouped, but everyone knew it was only a matter of time. General Matthew Hayes stood at the center of the room, his tall frame commanding attention. He was a man in his late 50s with graying hair and a stern expression that rarely softened. Despite his age, he carried himself with the energy of someone half his years, moving quickly between stations and issuing directives with precision. When he spotted Ethan and Laura, he gestured for them to join him. "You're the ones who woke up the big fish," Hayes said bluntly, his piercing gaze locking onto Ethan. "Tell me everything." For the next hour, Ethan and Laura recounted their story, the strange seismic activity, the mysterious signals, the alien fleet, and finally Leviathan's emergence. Hayes listened intently, occasionally interrupting to ask questions or clarify details. By the end of their explanation, his expression had shifted from skepticism to cautious curiosity. "So let me get this straight," Hayes said, leaning back in his chair. "You think this Leviathan is some kind of ancient protector buried beneath the ocean floor, and somehow it managed to single-handedly wipe out most of the alien fleet?" "That's right," Ethan confirmed. "But we don't know how long it can keep fighting. It's powerful, but even it has limits." "And what do they want?" Hayes asked, pointing at the screen showing the remaining alien ships. "Why are they here?" Ethan hesitated. "We're not sure. Maybe they're after resources, or maybe they see Leviathan as a threat and decided to take it out before it could act." Hayes frowned, clearly dissatisfied with the lack of concrete answers. "Speculation won't help us. We need facts, and we need a plan." Before anyone could respond, alarms blared throughout the room. Technicians scrambled to identify the source of the disturbance, their fingers flying across keyboards. Moments later, one of them shouted, "Sir, we've got movement offshore again. It's Leviathan." Everyone turned to the main screen, which displayed live satellite footage of the ocean. Sure enough, Leviathan was on the move, heading inland. Its massive form cut through the water with alarming speed, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. Coastal towns were already flooding as the creature's sheer size displaced millions of gallons of seawater. "What's it doing?" Laura whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know," Ethan admitted, his stomach sinking. "But it's not heading toward the aliens." Hayes clenched his jaw, his mind racing. "Evacuate all coastal zones immediately. I don't care how many people are out there. We can't risk losing more lives." Orders flew across communication channels as emergency broadcasts urged residents to flee. Cars clogged highways, boats crowded harbors, and helicopters buzzed overhead, evacuating those trapped in remote areas. Chaos reigned, but amidst the panic, one thing became clear. Leviathan wasn't attacking indiscriminately. It seemed to be following something, or someone. "Look," Laura exclaimed, pointing at the screen. A cluster of blinking red dots appeared near Leviathan's projected path. "Those are alien ships. They must have regrouped." Sure enough, the surviving vessels had positioned themselves directly in Leviathan's path, forming a defensive line. Energy beams lashed out, striking the creature repeatedly, but Leviathan barely slowed. With a deafening roar, it surged forward, smashing through the blockade with terrifying ease. Alien ships exploded in fiery bursts, their wreckage sinking beneath the waves. But the victory came at a cost. As Leviathan continued its rampage, chunks of its body began to break apart, falling into the ocean like shattered stone. The golden glow that had once illuminated its scales dimmed, replaced by dark cracks spreading across its surface. "It's injured," Ethan realized, his voice filled with dread. "Whatever those aliens hit it with, it's hurting it." Hayes turned to him, his expression grim. "Can it recover?" "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "But if it doesn't, we'll lose our best chance at stopping them." A heavy silence fell over the room as everyone processed the implications. Without Leviathan, humanity stood little chance against the alien invaders, and yet relying on a being they barely understood felt like playing with fire. "We need to find a way to heal it," Laura said suddenly, her eyes lighting up with determination. "If we can figure out what makes it tick, maybe we can help it recover." Hayes raised an eyebrow. "And how do you propose we do that?" Ethan hesitated, then glanced at the data still stored on their portable device. "Remember those energy signals we detected earlier? They're connected to Leviathan, somehow. If we can amplify them again, if we can channel Earth's natural energy directly into it, we might be able to restore its strength." Hayes studied them for a moment, weighing the risks. Finally, he nodded. "Do it. But you'd better be right about this, because if you're wrong, we're out of options." With renewed purpose, Ethan and Laura set to work. They gathered a team of scientists and engineers, pooling their knowledge and resources to create a new system capable of amplifying Earth's geothermal energy. Time was running out. Leviathan's movements were growing slower, its roars weaker. The aliens, sensing their advantage, launched another wave of attacks, forcing the creature to retreat deeper into the ocean. As the team worked tirelessly, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. Every second counted, and failure wasn't an option. Humanity's survival depended on Leviathan, and Leviathan's survival depended on them. Hours passed, each one feeling longer than the last. When the system was finally ready, Ethan and Laura stood side by side, staring at the controls. This, was it, their last chance to tip the scales in their favor. "Are you ready?" Laura asked, her hand hovering over the activation switch. Ethan took a deep breath, nodding. "Let's do it." With that, they activated the system. Energy surged through the wires, creating a low hum that grew louder and more intense. Outside, the ground trembled as the amplified signals reached outward, seeking their target. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, far out at sea, Leviathan let out a guttural roar. Its body glowed brighter, the golden light spreading across its scales until it resembled a living sun. The creature surged forward with renewed strength, smashing through alien ships with ease. One by one, the invaders fell, their once mighty fleet reduced to burning wreckage. Back at HQ, Ethan and Laura collapsed onto the floor, exhausted but triumphant. They had done it. They had tipped the scales in humanity's favor. The room was eerily quiet after the system powered down. Ethan and Laura sat on the floor, their bodies heavy with exhaustion but their minds racing. The hum of machinery had faded, leaving only the distant murmur of voices from the command center. Soldiers and technicians continued their work, but for a brief moment it felt like the world had paused to catch its breath. Outside, the ocean stretched endlessly, calm now that Leviathan's fury had subsided. The creature had retreated beneath the waves, disappearing as suddenly as it had emerged. Its glowing form no longer lit up the horizon, and the alien ships that had once filled the skies were reduced to smoldering debris scattered across the water. For the first time in days, there was a fragile sense of peace, but it didn't last long. General Hayes entered the room, his boots clicking sharply against the tiled floor. His expression was unreadable, though the tension in his jaw suggested he wasn't entirely pleased. He glanced at Ethan and Laura, then gestured for them to follow him. "We need to talk," Hayes said simply, leading them to a private conference room. The space was small and utilitarian, with a single table surrounded by chairs. A holographic display hovered above the surface, showing real-time updates from satellites tracking the remaining alien activity. So far, the invaders hadn't regrouped, but everyone knew it was only a matter of time. Hayes took a seat, leaning forward with his elbows on the table. "You two just pulled off something incredible," he began, his tone measured. "But let's be clear. We're not out of the woods yet. That thing, Leviathan, it saved us this time. But what happens when it decides we're the problem?" Ethan hesitated, glancing at Laura before speaking. "We don't know what it wants. All we've seen so far is that it's protecting Earth. Maybe it sees us as part of the planet, or maybe it doesn't care about us at all." Laura nodded in agreement. "What we do know is that it's ancient, older than anything we've ever encountered, and it's been buried under the ocean for who knows how long. Whatever woke it up, whether it was the aliens or our experiments, it's here now. We can't ignore it." Hayes rubbed his temples, clearly struggling to process everything. "So you're saying we have no choice but to trust it, to hope it keeps saving us every time those aliens show up?" "It's more complicated than that," Ethan replied. "Leviathan isn't invincible. It got hurt during the battle, and if we want it to keep fighting, we need to help it heal." Hayes raised an eyebrow. "Heal it? How exactly do you plan to do that?" Ethan pulled out their portable device, bringing up the data they'd collected during their earlier experiments. "The energy signals we detected, they're tied to Leviathan somehow. They're like life support. When we amplified them, it gave Leviathan a boost. If we can find a way to channel Earth's natural energy directly into it, geothermal power, ocean currents, even sunlight, we might be able to restore it completely." Hayes studied the data silently, his sharp eyes scanning the numbers and graphs. Finally, he leaned back in his chair, exhaling deeply. "Even if I greenlight this, and that's a big if, where do we start? We don't have the resources to build another system like the one you used earlier." "We don't need to," Laura interjected quickly. "Deep Haven still has most of the equipment we salvaged from the abandoned station. If we can get back there, we can modify it to focus on healing instead of amplifying." Hayes frowned. "Deep Haven is underwater. Getting there won't be easy, not with the aliens still lurking around. And even if we manage to pull it off, there's no guarantee this will work." "It's our best shot," Ethan insisted. "If Leviathan falls, we lose our biggest ally. Without it, we're sitting ducks." For several moments, Hayes said nothing. He stared at the holographic display, watching as blinking red dots representing alien ships flickered intermittently on the screen. Then, with a resigned sigh, he nodded. "All right, you've got 24 hours to put together a plan. After that, we move. But if anything goes wrong, if Leviathan turns on us, you're both taking full responsibility." Ethan and Laura exchanged a glance, relief washing over them despite the gravity of the situation. They knew the risks, but they also knew failure wasn't an option. Humanity's survival depended on Leviathan, and Leviathan's survival depended on them. By the time they returned to Deep Haven, the research station was barely recognizable. The violent tremors caused by Leviathan's awakening had left deep cracks in the walls, and sections of the facility were flooded with seawater. Equipment floated aimlessly in the corridors, and emergency lights cast an eerie red glow over the scene. Despite the damage, the core systems were still operational, thanks to the station's reinforced design. "This place looks worse than I expected," Laura muttered, sloshing through ankle-deep water as they made their way to the main. "Do you think we can fix everything in time?" "We'll make it work," Ethan replied firmly, though doubt lingered in his voice. "We don't have a choice." With the help of a small team of engineers sent by General Hayes, they set to work repairing and modifying the equipment. Iriko's goal was simple: create a network of conduits capable of channeling Earth's geothermal energy directly into Leviathan's core. It was a risky plan, requiring precise calculations and split-second timing. One wrong move could overload the system, or worse, harm Leviathan instead of helping it. As they worked, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every creak of the metal walls, every ripple in the water outside the windows, made him glance over his shoulder. He tried to convince himself it was just paranoia, but deep down he knew better. Leviathan was still out there, resting, recovering, waiting. And while it had protected humanity so far, there was no telling how long its patience would last. "Ethan," Laura called from across the room, snapping him out of his thoughts. "Come look at this." He hurried over, finding her hunched over a monitor displaying new seismic readings. The patterns were similar to the ones they'd observed before, but this time they were stronger and closer. "It's moving again," Laura said, her voice tense. "Whatever it's doing, it's heading toward us." Ethan's heart sank. It must sense what we're trying to do. Maybe it's curious, or maybe it thinks we're a threat. Before they could discuss further, the ground beneath them shook violently. Alarms blared and water surged through the cracks in the walls, flooding the lab faster than anyone could react. The team scrambled to secure the equipment, but it was clear they were running out of time. "We need to finish this. Now!" Ethan shouted over the noise. "Laura, reroute power to the main conduit. Everyone else focus on stabilizing the system." The next few minutes passed in a blur of frantic activity. Hands moved quickly, tightening bolts, adjusting wires, and calibrating sensors. Sweat dripped from their foreheads as they worked against the clock, knowing that failure meant certain death, for themselves and possibly for humanity. Finally, everything was ready. Ethan stood at the control panel, his finger hovering over the activation switch. The entire station groaned under the strain of the incoming energy surge, and the water level continued to rise. Outside, the ocean churned violently as if anticipating what was about to happen. "Do it," Hayes's voice crackled over the radio. "Now." Ethan closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and pressed the button. Energy coursed through the conduits, creating a deafening hum that vibrated through the station. Lights flickered wildly and sparks flew from overloaded circuits. The water surrounding them began to glow faintly, pulsing in rhythm with the energy flow. For a moment, everything seemed to hold together. Then, with a deafening roar, Leviathan emerged from the depths, its massive form rising above the station. Its golden scales shimmered with renewed strength, the cracks that had marred its body now healed. The creature turned its glowing eyes toward Deep Haven, studying it intently. Ethan held his breath, unsure whether they had succeeded or doomed themselves. Slowly, Leviathan lowered itself back into the water, its movements deliberate and calm. As it disappeared beneath the waves, the shaking stopped, and the alarms fell silent. The ocean grew still, almost peaceful, as if acknowledging the bond that had been forged between humanity and its ancient guardian. "Well," Laura said softly, breaking the silence. "I guess that answers that." Ethan managed a weak smile, though his legs felt like jelly. "Yeah, let's just hope it sticks around." Unbeknownst to them, however, the aliens weren't done yet. Hidden among the wreckage of their fleet, Cale Vorn plotted his next move. Humanity had proven resourceful, but even Leviathan couldn't protect them forever. And when the time came, Vorn vowed to ensure Earth paid dearly for its defiance.